Some people don't lose feelings all at once. It happens slowly. Through smaller replies, delayed enthusiasm, shorter conversations, less curiosity, less emotional presence. And the terrifying part is, the softer your heart is, the longer it takes you to admit what's happening. Because soft people don't immediately react to emotional distance. They excuse it. They explain it away. They become more understanding exactly when they should become more alert. And that's usually where the imbalance begins. The uncomfortable truth is that soft-hearted people often mistake emotional endurance for love. They stay patient longer, forgive faster, tolerate more silence, accept weaker effort. Not because they enjoy pain, but because attachment quietly changes what they're willing to survive. You can actually watch it happen. Someone who once had standards slowly starts negotiating with disappointment. Someone who once spoke naturally begins speaking carefully. They stop bringing up what hurts them because they're afraid honesty might create distance. So they adapt instead. And people notice that adaptation faster than you think. Especially emotionally selfish people. They notice who keeps staying, who keeps understanding, who keeps forgiving, who keeps returning after being emotionally neglected. And once someone realizes your presence feels guaranteed, something changes in the emotional atmosphere. Not always immediately. Sometimes the affection still exists. Sometimes the attention still appears occasionally. But the urgency fades first. That's what most people miss. Attention changes before love admits it. At first, they used to react to your absence. Now they react to your availability. Your messages become expected. Your loyalty becomes predictable. Your emotional support becomes normal. And human beings have a dangerous habit of emotionally undervaluing what feels permanent. That's the part soft-hearted people struggle admitting out loud. Because they love deeply. They give reassurance naturally. They stay emotionally consistent. They make people feel safe. But safety without uncertainty slowly loses psychological tension. And people rarely notice when appreciation quietly turns into comfort, and comfort quietly turns into emotional laziness. You see it in small moments first. They stop asking how your day really was. Conversations become updates instead of connection. They scroll while you're talking. They say, "I'm tired," more often than they say, "Tell me more." You start carrying the emotional weight of conversations by yourself. You become the one reviving dead energy. The one checking emotional temperature. The one trying to recreate reactions that once happened naturally. And eventually something humiliating starts happening internally. You become grateful for effort that used to be normal. A fast reply suddenly feels exciting. Basic attention starts feeling valuable. A small compliment changes your entire mood for hours. And that's when attachment becomes dangerous. Because the softer your heart is, the more emotionally addictive inconsistency becomes. You start surviving on emotional breadcrumbs while convincing yourself it's enough. One good conversation erases 10 painful silences. One affectionate night makes you ignore weeks of emotional distance. And the frightening part is how normal this slowly starts feeling. You stop noticing how much of yourself has shrunk trying to maintain connection. You become easier to disappoint, easier to ignore, easier to emotionally manage. Because soft-hearted people don't like creating emotional conflict. They would rather silently suffer than risk becoming difficult. So instead of expressing pain directly, they internalize it. Late at night. Rereading conversations. Checking if their message sounded annoying. Wondering if they asked for too much. Watching someone become emotionally colder while still pretending everything is fine. That quiet confusion changes people. especially when the relationship becomes emotionally unequal. Because eventually one person starts caring more about maintaining connection than the other person cares about losing it. And once that happens, emotional power shifts completely. The person who fears loss more starts abandoning themselves first. You can hear it in their voice. See it in their timing. Feel it in their emotional restraint. They stop saying what they truly feel because they're trying not to push someone away. But that self-silencing slowly destroys people internally. Especially soft-hearted people. Because they keep loving while simultaneously feeling emotionally unsafe. That contradiction creates exhaustion no one sees. And eventually they begin measuring their emotional worth through reactions. How fast someone replies. How enthusiastic they sound. Whether they viewed the story. Whether they asked questions back. Whether the energy still feels mutual. And the terrifying part is how quickly someone's mood can become controlled by another person's attention. A single cold response can ruin an entire night. A delayed reply can create hours of overthinking. A change in tone becomes emotionally catastrophic. Not because soft-hearted people are weak, but because emotional attachment quietly trains people to fear emotional distance. Especially after inconsistency enters the relationship. Because inconsistency creates obsession faster than stability ever could. You start chasing emotional reassurance instead of connection. Trying to feel chosen again. Trying to feel important again. Trying to recreate emotional intensity that used to happen naturally. And most people don't notice how humiliating that becomes until much later. You start pretending not to care while secretly waiting for attention. Pretending silence doesn't hurt while checking your phone repeatedly. Pretending emotional distance feels normal because admitting the truth feels worse. Sometimes the most painful part isn't even the neglect itself. It's realizing how easily someone adapted to giving you less. That realization changes something inside people. Because soft hearts expect emotional reciprocity. Not perfection. Just care. Presence. Consistency. Effort that feels genuine. But emotionally careless people slowly teach soft-hearted people to lower expectations just to preserve connection. And eventually they begin accepting behavior they once promised themselves they'd never tolerate. That's how emotional self-betrayal begins. Quietly. Gradually. Without dramatic moments. You stop asking for reassurance because you're tired of feeling needy. You stop expressing disappointment because you fear sounding sensitive. You stop reacting honestly because you sense their patience shrinking. And eventually you become emotionally smaller around someone you once felt emotionally free with. That's one of the saddest transformations attachment creates. Especially when you remember how different things felt in the beginning. Because in the beginning, they noticed everything. Your mood. Your timing. Your silence. Your energy. Your absence affected them emotionally. Now it barely interrupts their routine. And that realization feels deeply humiliating. You start wondering whether you changed, or whether they simply stopped valuing what became familiar. Because familiarity does something dangerous to attraction. It removes observation. People stop studying what they believe they already have. That's why emotional neglect often feels invisible at first. Nothing dramatic happens. No huge betrayal. No explosive ending. Just slow emotional reduction. Less intensity. Less curiosity. Less emotional responsiveness. Until one day you realize you've been trying to emotionally revive something the other person slowly adapted to living without. And soft-hearted people usually stay too long inside that realization. Because they remember who the person used to be. They keep emotionally interacting with memories while reality changes quietly in front of them. That's why emotional detachment feels so psychologically violent. Not because affection disappears instantly, but because it fades gradually while hope stays alive. And hope can emotionally trap people longer than love itself. Especially soft-hearted people. Because they believe patience can restore emotional closeness. So they become even softer, more available, more forgiving, more emotionally understanding, without realizing they are rewarding the exact behavior hurting them. And unfortunately, some people absolutely abuse that. Not always consciously, not always maliciously. But people naturally put less effort into what keeps staying no matter how little they give. That truth sounds cruel because it is. People become careless with emotional access once they stop fearing its loss. And soft-hearted people often make their loyalty too emotionally unconditional. The frightening part is realizing how quickly emotional importance changes once someone becomes certain of your presence. You stop feeling emotionally rare. You become emotionally expected. And expected things rarely create urgency. That's why some people suddenly become emotionally attentive only after distance appears. Only after replies slow down. Only after your attention weakens. Only after your absence becomes psychologically real again. Because absence reactivates observation. People notice what they stop feeling guaranteed. And that realization destroys a lot of soft-hearted people internally. Because they begin questioning everything. Was the love real? Did the affection expire? Were they only valued when emotionally uncertain? Those questions become dangerous late at night. Especially when loneliness mixes with attachment. Because loneliness makes people romanticize emotional inconsistency. It makes occasional affection feel meaningful enough to stay. Even when the emotional imbalance becomes obvious. And eventually soft-hearted people start losing themselves in subtle ways. Their confidence weakens. Their emotional stability becomes reactive. Their happiness becomes conditional. They start feeling relieved over basic kindness. Relieved over effort. Relieved over attention that once happened naturally. That emotional downgrade changes people deeply. Especially when they realize how much emotional energy they're spending trying to maintain someone else's interest. At some point, the relationship stops feeling mutual. One person becomes emotionally relaxed. The other becomes emotionally hyper-aware. One person feels secure. The other feels replaceable. And that emotional imbalance quietly destroys self-worth over time. Because nothing damages confidence faster than feeling emotionally tolerated instead of genuinely desired. You begin noticing small humiliations everywhere. They laugh harder with other people. Reply faster to strangers. Show curiosity toward people they barely know while your conversations feel emotionally exhausted. You start wondering why newer people receive energy you had to beg for emotionally. And the answer is usually painful. Novelty creates attention naturally. Familiarity does not. That's why soft-hearted people often suffer silently. Because they keep trying to earn emotional intensity that used to exist effortlessly. And the more they chase it, the weaker they begin feeling internally. You stop recognizing yourself after enough emotional imbalance. You become anxious, careful, overly observant, emotionally dependent on tiny reactions. You start hearing emotional distance in simple phrases. Feeling rejection inside ordinary silence. Interpreting pauses like threats. And eventually the relationship becomes less about connection and more about emotional survival. That's when people slowly stop recognizing themselves. The saddest part is that soft-hearted people usually blame themselves first. Maybe I'm too emotional. Maybe I ask for too much. Maybe I'm overthinking. But deep down, they already feel the shift. They feel conversations becoming colder. They feel emotional enthusiasm disappearing. They feel themselves becoming emotionally ordinary to someone who once intensely noticed them. And once someone feels ordinary inside love, emotional loneliness begins growing fast. Because there's a unique pain in feeling emotionally unseen by someone who once made you feel emotionally important. Especially when you're still emotionally attached. Especially when you still care deeply. Especially when part of you keeps hoping the old version of them returns. But people rarely return emotionally the same way memories do. And that's usually the realization soft-hearted people avoid the longest. Because letting go doesn't only mean losing the person. Sometimes it means accepting how much emotional pain you tolerated hoping to feel chosen again. And that truth stays heavy for a very long time. If this felt uncomfortably familiar, subscribe for more psychological explorations of human behavior.